So welcome to Worlds Beyond. I'm Jared Walters. I'm on location here with, I finally managed to get Sam on the radio. Hi Sam.
Hello.
And we're here with EFT practitioner and expert Marcus West. How are you, Marcus?
I'm fine, thanks.
Excellent, excellent. So I've brought the two of you together because Sam's been doing a lot of research with EFT, and we met very briefly a couple of years ago at a psychic fair in Cardiff.
Yes.
So just can I ask, can you give us a little bit of background about sort of EFT and yourself, and just a little bit of background on yourself, like?
Okay. Well, I did a degree in psychology back in the early 70s, or it was in several things. Psychology was a major part of it, and since then I've been interested in the mind and healing and what's possible and what's not possible and the power of thought and so on. And I did a lot of neuro-linguistic programming in the 80s and 90s, NLP, and then I came across EFT, and I was sent a demonstration tape by a friend of mine, or someone I knew. I wasn't really a friend, but I knew she'd done a lot of NLP, and she was raving about this technique called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, and it sounded very, very wacky. It was about tapping on the endpoint of certain meridians to release stuck emotions, and it did sound really, really out there, and my impulse was really to discard it, but because I knew she was strongly into NLP, and because I knew, I had some respect for her for that reason, I thought, well, this is curious, but I won't discard it. And so I did some EFT training. I looked into it a bit more, did some EFT training, and found, sure enough, that although it's very strange, it is very effective for a lot of things. So I've been a practitioner in EFT since the late 90s, I suppose, blimey, a long time ago. And, well, that's a bit of an intro to EFT. Shall I say more about EFT?
Yeah, go.
So, when I'm with a client, I normally start with a kind of hand-waving kind of metaphor. I say, we all have experienced emotions. Emotions go up and down. They ebb and flow. If we're in an acutely fearful situation, we feel fear, and when that situation passes, the fear goes. Or if there's there's a kind of dynamism, a dynamic element about emotions, that we should be in a kind of dynamic living flow. It's not good to be without them, because emotions tell us things and alert us to things and remind us about what's going on inside us and so on. So there should be this dynamic ebbing and flowing of emotions. But sometimes, for example, there may be some fear which rises to a kind of peak, and instead of releasing, flowing, it kind of sticks there, or anger or whatever, some emotion, and that's where EFT can be very helpful. And according to the EFT model, what's happening there is really that this acute emotion is being stuck by energy. It's like it rises to a peak, and then rather than dissipating, it's kind of stuck. And tapping on the endpoints of the meridians can help kind of loosen it, soften it, allow it to flow, allow it to normalise again. And so the phobia or the anger or the whatever it was that was kind of stuck just releases. And that's really the way it is with EFT. It sounds extraordinary. And when I first came across it, it seemed incredible. But I've used it, for example, with phobias. I've used it a lot with phobias, and I found it very, very effective.
So what are the meridian lines then?
Well, the meridian lines are the lines of chi energy as used in acupuncture and shiatsu and so on.
The martial arts users are like Aikido and Kung Fu.
Indeed,
use are very similar.
Indeed. So
do they run throughout the whole body, or?
They do. There are 12 major meridian lines, and I think there are hundreds of minor ones, lesser ones. But there are 12 major ones, and they have starting points in the fingers or toes or around the face, and the lines kind of flow throughout the body, from the fingers via the head, via the torso, the legs, to the toes.
Is it very similar sort of in principle then to, like, I know when we talked to Tracy a few weeks ago about reflexology, it's all about using different parts of the feet to symbolise different parts of the body.
Right.
So is it very similar in concept to sort of reflexology then? Because obviously if it's using key energy, another concept he uses that is Reiki. So does it kind of fit in with those sort of practices, or is it thought of as separate, or how is it sort of viewed in amongst the other sort of complementary therapies then?
Okay, well, I suppose I do several forms of complementary therapies, and I know lots of people would like to find parallels and see how things fit. I tend to think that the world is an extraordinary and diverse place, and so I don't like forcing one system into the mould of another system, if you see what I mean. And I don't know that reflexology is about chi energy. It may be. I don't know. But so I don't feel the kind of need to find parallels between EFT and other systems, if you like. For me, it's a kind of respecting the system, in itself. And to try. And there's a danger when you try and say, oh, this is just like such and such. There's a danger of finding the commonalities and brushing away, scrubbing away the unique points, if you see what I mean. So I'd rather say, well, this is EFT, this is the way it works. There may be commonalities with whatever, Reiki or reflexology, but I'd rather just view it as itself. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I get a gay on that. So how has it affected you then? Obviously, has it actually changed you becoming a practitioner and how you actually view sort of life or the world, or obviously the people that you come into your surroundings, and how, if you're helping someone with their emotions and stuff, do you use it to help yourself as well?
That's an interesting question. I think very often the clients that come to you, their issues have something to say about yourself. I think a lot of practitioners will say that the clients that come to them, there is something about the client that resonates with the practitioner. That the practitioner almost needs. Well, it's a bit grand to say the practitioner needs a client. That's not quite what I mean. But there can be a kind of reminder in the practitioner of what the practitioner needs to be looking at. The reminder comes from the client. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Do you practice like in Cardiff? So do you practice in Cardiff, or do you practice all around South Wales, or?
Well, I'm in Cardiff. I was working in the treatment room in Halcyon Days in Wellfield Road, but they closed recently. So a long time ago I was practicing in my front room in my home, which is in Roath in Cardiff. And when Halcyon Days closed, I went back to doing that, or went forward to doing that. So I'm still practicing, but I'm practicing in my house again in Roath. Yes. So
what do you think of like general opinion of EFT is then? How do people take to it quite easily, or do you think there's some adversity towards it, or are people curious? What would you say to people looking into this for the first time then? As not as a practitioner, but as a means of healing then.
Yeah. Well, some people come to me because they've heard of EFT and they check it out to see whether there's anyone they want to see if there's anyone local who does EFT, and they find me on the net. Other people come to me because they want some healing of some kind. They don't really care what method I use. So as I was saying, I use other things like EFT, and there's a Hawaiian shamanic system called Huna that I also use. So in that case, I'll have a long conversation with them, and what seems to be appropriate just emerges from the conversation. So I might then say, it seems to me that the most appropriate thing would be to do some EFT, and then I'll explain EFT, and they'll say, typically, well, if that's what you think, then fair enough. Rather like that.
You were thinking of going into it, Sam, when you were at some point, or actually looking at maybe just doing some training and that sort of stuff, weren't you?
Yeah. I've done quite a lot of research on the internet, on YouTube.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But it's like for different, not cases, but like, say like if you wanted to quit smoking then.
Right.
And because I did find there's quite a lot of different techniques for one topic then.
Okay. Well, people in EFT and NLP and in lots of these healing modalities, they like being creative. They like expanding systems. They come across a system, they absorb it, and for whatever reason, there can be a very strong impulse to change it, to add things to it, to make it their own in some way. And I don't know whether that's so that they can advertise it as being a unique thing, or what. But for that reason, there tends to be a proliferation of systems. So I'm not surprised you found quite a few different approaches to things. It's not a very helpful thing to say, perhaps, but that's by way of explanation as you know why you can find a lot of different approaches.
So it's like a certain part of your body would release certain chemicals which you need for that one particular or habit, or if you want to say, like, if you've got phobias, there's one area in particular you should be like tapping on to release different chemicals.
That's a good question. Really, there was the forerunner to EFT was a system called TFT, thought field therapy. I think that was devised in the 60s sometime, and by a chap whose name I can't remember, which is I'm sorry, but he had a very elaborate system of tapping on the meridian endpoints. He was really the guy who discovered that it was worth doing, but he had a very elaborate diagnostic system. So he would diagnose, and then he would treat very specific points for phobias or allergies or addictions or whatever. And then this chap, Gary Craig, came along in the 90s, and he thought there's a lot of redundancy in this. I mean, it would be simpler, it'd be more teachable, it'd be easier to practice, be easier to apply, if rather than having all these different processes tapping on all these different points, he thought it would be better to have a single system whereby you tapped on all the points. And so some would be unnecessarily tapped on, but you'd cover all the points. And that was Gary Craig's contribution. He was really the deviser of EFT in the 90s. So typically you go through all the points when you're doing the tapping, and some of them might feel tender, and sometimes people feel kind of energy flows down the wrist into their fingers. Sometimes that you feel slightly nauseous when you're doing the tapping, but typically there's a kind of cycle that the points go through. They start out being perhaps a little inert, they soften and they become a bit more energized in some way, or uncomfortable, whatever. And then as you do 3 or 4 or 5 rounds of the tapping, all that sensation kind of dies away again with the phobia or addiction or whatever it is, and normality is restored.
Because some of the ones which I watched on YouTube, I would be a bit embarrassed to actually put them into practice in public.
because of where the points are.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, okay. Well, there's a collarbone point you're thinking of, and
well, the one I used to do was to quit smoking.
Yeah.
It was I can't remember exactly. It's like you would tap on one hand,
right,
then you would swap,
okay,
and then that, and vice versa.
Right. Okay. Also, when you say about not doing it in public, you mean it's not so much embarrassing parts of the body, so much as just
it's just like like if you're like in a queue, and you also have the urge to do it.
Yeah.
You would feel a bit like self-conscious, because people would be like, "What the hell is she doing?"
Well, I think they would. I mean, you can tap discreetly, and you don't have to tap. You can also kind of massage like that. So if you're in a business situation, there's a table, for example, you could kind of do work on the points out of sight under the tabletop. But very often this is done in a therapeutic environment, so it doesn't. There's no public around, so it doesn't really matter.
So, can I ask, where are the different points?
You certainly may ask. And the main points are, I'll just go through them. This isn't very good radio, you understand, but there's a point on the inner edge of the eyebrow there. Mm-hmm. There's the outer edge of the eyebrow. There's vertically below the pupil on the edge of the orbit of the eye orbit. There's vertically below the nose. Just above the chin. So this is centrally you're talking now. It's just below the collarbones. It's just below the armpit, hand's width below the armpit.
I haven't done that one.
Okay.
It just kind of feels like jelly on my arm.
Yeah.
It's just like, a reminder I need to lose some weight.
Yeah.
Am I right by there, kind of thing?
Kind of. Well, what I tend to do is I use. I wouldn't tap the client on there. I'd get them to tap themselves. But I tend to use, or invite them to use, fairly large area of all the 3 fingers, so it's quite a large, 2 inches across, and it is so you can tap that kind of area there.
So that's your index, your trigger finger, and the middle.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
So everyone except pinky then.
Well, and that's there as well, but it's very clear that you can get a nice area there if you're doing that. And then there are some thumb and finger points there, which is like the upper outer edge of the thumb. It's hard to describe, isn't it? And all the fingers and the kind of karate chop point, and then there's a point on there. I mean, it isn't just tapping. There's a bit more to it than that. There's a kind of setup phase where you.
That's interesting because I'm doing that.
Yeah.
That area there, the karate chop area, that feels quite tender.
Oh, when I say karate chop, I kind of mean that really.
Oh, right. So
The other side.
Well,
no.
Here.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right on the bone.
Yeah, about there.
In the middle, Jar?
There?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
That does actually still feel a bit tender, that area.
Well, if you work on any of these points and you find that they are tender, then that's quite a good suggestion that there is some energetic kind of blockage there, and it's worth working on. Yeah. No, so I was saying it isn't just tapping. There is a kind of setup process, and there's a middle phase where between doing 2 rounds of tapping, you take a breath and you move your hand backwards and forwards in front of the visual field. So the idea of that is to encourage left and right brain hemisphere communication. Yeah.
So, how did you? I know obviously you said you were introduced to it back in the after studying the mind and stuff. So, what sort of other studies have you done sort of into the mind and that sort of thing? What sort of interest do you have in that area? And have you done other sort of techniques? Because you've talked about other techniques you do as well.
Well, yes. I suppose the first thing I did really was the neurolinguistic programming (NLP) back in the 80s, and that's about. It's hard to summarise, but there are several strands to it. One is about how you structure your experience. So, for example, a simple example: if you imagine a time you're on holiday, imagine a pleasant time you're on holiday, and if you then imagine in your mind's eye a particularly pleasant moment during that holiday. If you do that, it might help to shut your eyes, but let's do that here now. And so, just if you imagine you had controls to increase the intensity, of say the brightness. So if you have a strong visual sense and you visualize that time that was a very pleasant time during holiday. Then if you imagine there's a control, you can turn up the brightness. If you do that now, that will typically increase the enjoyment of the pleasure in that moment. And Jared is nodding here, and Sam is nodding as well. So that's just a really, really simple way of kind of thinking about, well, what am I doing with my experience? What can I do with my experience? So there's a phobia cure in NLP. There's a lot of stuff to do with the inner mind, the unconscious mind, if you like, with NLP, which I think is very, very good stuff. Because
I agree with you. It's just as soon as you said holiday, I could see a beach, so you sort of turn up the intensity, so you can listen to the sound of the waves. When I do meditation, I always use waves to sort of focus my breathing. And for some reason, I could just see a palm tree come in. It just sort of, as soon as you sort of turn it up, just kind of, because obviously I do a lot of meditation anyway. You probably just slipped into it very quickly.
Sure.
But
turning it up made a difference.
Yeah.
So that's just a really simple thing one can do. Generations of people have never thought of doing, and the NLP chaps came along and thought, well, let's try this.
So it's a way of like, but I've seen it sort of, on different TV programs and different things where they say if you're in a nervous situation, try and focus more on a situation where you were feel quite confident and quite at ease, or felt accepted and loved, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Is it very, very similar to that then?
Well, that's an aspect of it, of NLP. Yeah. I suppose since I did EFT, that I tend to use EFT for quite a lot of the things that clients come to me for, like phobias and addictions and so on. But NLP has got a. I have a soft spot for NLP. I think it taught me a lot, and I think it's got some very, very, very good ways of thinking about the world built into it. So I've got to, let's hear it for NLP. It's good stuff.
It's funny, isn't it? Because sometimes the simplest things can have the greatest response to it.
Yeah, indeed.
You know, even just because if you think about it, our brain makes connections between different things.
Mm-hmm.
We form neural connections.
Yeah.
So obviously, that is one way, I suppose, of actually reprogramming those connections. Because the stronger we associate, like for example, if I have a piece of fruit and a bar of chocolate, I'm going to automatically make the connection that chocolate equals nice and fruit doesn't much equal nice. Do you know what I mean? Because obviously chocolate as well naturally releases a lot of endorphins.
Uh-huh.
So obviously you've got, and I, as you can tell, eating probably more chocolate than I do fruit. So yeah, is it very similar? Like obviously just reprogramming those different connections in the brain then?
It's about that and more. It's about consciously controlling stuff that a lot of the time you don't even realise you can consciously control. So again, it's a bit like ebbing and flowing of emotional states, and rather than being at the mercy of them. Yeah, it's kind of seizing control of them a bit and saying, actually, I don't. It's not good for me to be depressed at this time, so I'm going to be something else. It's like just kind of taking control of things.
I suppose I know you said about not making comparisons, but there's so many different things out there. There's different therapies or different ways of looking at life. Yeah, they just come down to those simple things. As if you change your thinking, you can change your life. If you change and how you respond to the world around you, because there's so many different things that the human spirit, as a word, then I guess, responds to around us, and how we make connections.
I think that's very true. There's a kind of new age saying, two men look out through prison bars, one sees mud, the other stars. Depending on where you're looking. Yeah, it's the same world. It's the same stuff out there. What you focus on, what you pay attention to, what you give energy to, is what grows, and what comes to loom larger and to dominate and so on. So I think this whole thing about what you do with your attention, what you do with your mind, it really is central to living. Yeah.
I think that was very much. That's one of the concepts I think that keeps kind of all time and time again. That is a spiritualism. I'm not a spiritualist, although I do practice mediumship. I probably find more more with wizardry these days than anything else. But with that is a key concept, the concept of finding things. Whereas if you know that you found what you're looking for, then in other words, everything you need is inside you. So the more you change your perception, the more you focus on the good in your life, what you need and what you want in your life, the more you draw in that to you, and the more you're making those connections. And I suppose it's great how every time I do different interviews with different people from all different walks of life, that thread and that thinking still keeps coming up and up and up all the time.
Yeah. I spent time doing a lot of Sanskrit mantra, and there's a notion in mantra work that the universe is kind of alive, awash with these energies of love and abundance and compassion and healing and all these things. And when you're doing mantra, you're kind of it's like you're establishing, you're inviting those energies to flow through you. It's like you're establishing I'm trying to think of the way of putting it. We're declaring a kind of alignment with those energies by doing the mantra. And it's like when you do that, rather than these energies bypassing you, you're kind of inviting them to flow through you. So I wasn't going to say any of that, but it just occurred to me that kind of related to what you were just saying. I think,
that's why I kind of like to keep these talks just free and easy, because although we come and talk about one subject, there's so many different things that people get involved in, people do, that's useful to the audience and useful to those listening. Yeah. Can I ask, can you give an idea what actually Sanskrit mantra is? Because that's really sort of perked and interesting.
Oh, blimey.
You know?
Oh, gosh. Well, Sanskrit are an ancient, sacred Indian language, of course. And the mantra are their sound, like Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, and they relate to these energies, and the energies relate to gods and goddesses. So the gods and goddesses, like Lakshmi or Ganesh, they're kind of energy. They're personified forms of these kind of energy.
Yeah.
And so the Ganesh is to do with the energy of removing obstacles. So you chant to Ganesh if you're involved in a project and you want any obstacles to kind of melt away.
I wouldn't mind trying a bit of that. I might bit of mantra. I know John did a little bit when we did your Reiki level 1, didn't he?
Yeah.
He did. As far as like sort of EFT is concerned, then
Yes.
do you find that your technique over time has developed? Because I know you say different people try different techniques, or do you try and keep to the sort of core technique which you learned?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm kind of quite old school in lots of ways. So I did my EFT training initially in the late 90s, or mid 90s really, and I've kind of not deviated by a great deal from that. But I do retrainings every so often just to make sure I'm not hopelessly out of date. But so I suppose my basic technique hasn't changed all that much, but I've become more aware of the value of listening to the client during the process, because as I said, they can feel energy in leading down towards their fingers, or whatever. Certain points become more tender. They can feel a sense of disorientation in their head, and it's important to allow space for them to express this, and it's feedback about what's going on. So, for example, if a particular point is particularly tender, I will, we'll work on that more in subsequent rounds of tapping.
So, do you sort of do like blocks of treatment then as a service, or do you? Is it just all depending on what the customer, the client needs then?
It depends on what the client needs, really. So typically, I like to say that they'll know by the end of the first session that something is happening. But I wouldn't promise, everything is fixed in the first session. But it's quite confidence building to have a sense, that yes, something's definitely happening here. So I recognise that I need, another session or another 2 sessions or whatever. But I don't say you've got to book in for 12 sessions or whatever.
I bet it feels empowering though, knowing, what sort of feedback do you get off people? Because I bet it's empowering knowing, when people come away from you, they've had something, do people find it life changing? Obviously, with getting rid of a phobia, I'd assume that they would. Or is it something that people have to keep up over time? What sort of reaction do you get off people?
Well, it's normally quite a grateful one.
But yeah, I bet it's really empowering though for yourself.
Empowering. Well, it's a nice thing to be able to do. Yeah. Sure. I've got a Facebook page on EFT, and I just recently put a video of someone I'd done a snake phobia handling with, and I just happened to go to Pew's, the garden centre, and they've got a pet shop there, and I went in and they had lots of snakes there. So I thought, I must bring this person there, and so I did that. So we went there, and I took a video camera and I videoed her, peering into these snake cages. So and not reacting, and she was delighted. So that's very nice to be able to do that. You said something like, "Is it the thing that you have to keep up?" And that's a good question. You see, if you've to use a different metaphor, supposing you've got a car and you leave the brake on, you don't realise you've got to put the brake off, and you drive around and the engine kind of gets overheats and the brakes overheat, and it seems like a terrible mess. If someone knows just to take the brake off, then that fixes a whole load of problems. And once it's been changed, once that state of that brake has been changed from on to off, when you're driving, obviously you put it on when you're stopping. Then there's no kind of maintenance involved. You see what I mean? Once a block is gone, once a flow is established again, once that healthy flow of energy is established, to replace the kind of blocked flow that was holding in place the anguish or the unhelpful belief or the fear or the anger or whatever. Once that's gone, it's gone. It's not it's not going to build up again spontaneously.
Sam, do you have any questions?
Excuse me. Could EFT benefit with my epilepsy at all?
Oh gosh, I have absolutely no idea. I don't know whether EFT is applicable to epilepsy. I don't know.
Or like any illnesses like that.
Well, it's possible. I hesitate to say a definite yes, but when Gary Craig first released it, he said try it on everything, because he tried it on a huge range of things and got very good results with a lot of things. So I wouldn't, if someone came to me with epilepsy and said, could I do anything with EFT, I'd hesitate to say that I would expect an improvement in one session, but I might suggest that they try it. I might give them, suggest sequence of points they could try. Sorry, that's a bit kind of left field. I wasn't expecting that question. So, I suppose it's very easy to think that some issues, some ailments are very, very rooted in the physical, and therefore doing things to do with energy by EFT may not address them. But I think that's kind of slightly too simple. I think there is a crossover between all these things. There is an overlap. So, for example, allergies. I went through a phase of doing a lot of work with allergies and EFT, and EFT amazingly can reduce allergic responses.
Because I'm just thinking, by tapping, it's releasing certain chemicals.
Okay. I mean, it's thought more in terms of chi energy blockages being released.
It's not chemicals, more energetic.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So what connection are you making with that and the epilepsy?
Well, I was thinking is, could you gradually reduce the amount of tablets you're on, and with the tapping help, and gradually do it that way?
I don't know. I'd need to research it. I'd be hesitant to. I'd certainly be hesitant to. I wouldn't recommend people lower their medication.
Because yet again, it's like on, people to watch these YouTubes, and people might get a bit naive. Oh yeah, I'll try that. And there's all different techniques, like I said at the beginning, that this can cure your illness like that.
Yeah.
And people can obviously get. This is kind of led into a question. I'm looking for an opportunity to come in, so apologies for a bit of the left field there.
Okay.
But I think it's something that we could address on a larger level.
Yeah.
Firstly, what would you say is the medical community's attitude towards EFT, and how do they view it? And secondly, how should people looking to go into EFT view it in accordance with obviously medical practices, because obviously it is a complementary therapy. Just obviously wondering what your personal views.
And thirdly, have you ever tried it on animals? Like, if an animal gets stressed with fireworks, could you actually do it on an animal to calm the animal down?
I suspect in principle you could, but I don't really know where the meridian lines are on animals. But I guess, did you come across any of that when you were looking on YouTube?
No, it just popped in my head now. I get random things to pop in.
I would think that we share similar neurologies and energy systems and so on. So I think if humans can energy systems can get screwed up in this way, then I would guess animals can. Animals can as well, because you do get excessively frightened dogs and excessively angry
and if dogs
are
suffering with too much anxiety.
Straining from a trauma when they were younger or something.
Well, quite. I mean, in principle, it should be possible. And perhaps there's a whole new sideline of EFT practitioners. So, but coming back to your question, Jared, I keep calling you Gareth. I'm sorry.
That's all right. People. You did it last time we met, as people always do for some reason.
It gets called all sorts. Don't worry.
You want to try seeing the multiple spellings I've had of my name over the years. It's quite funny, actually.
Anyway, get back to the question.
Okay, so coming back to the question you asked, Jared, you asked about the medical profession. I think really the medical profession tends to ignore complementary therapies by and large. But there is a Professor Stewart, I think it is, from a university in the north of England somewhere, who is quite a keen advocate of EFT. And I know he's appearing at there's a big Meridian Therapies EFT conference coming up in November. And I remember seeing the program, and he's due to give some presentation there. And I remember seeing a little presentation on, I think it was BBC News a few months ago, January time, with him going through an EFT process and talking about how valuable he found it.
Do you think the medical profession's view on EFT is because it's obviously, it doesn't take into accepted sociological norms then? Or do you think it's down to a lot because of financial constraints, where they're being funded, that kind of thing?
No, I think it's the temperament of people who work in that area. I think it's to do with the scientific method and attitude, and I think that's a very good way of working. But I just stumbled upon EFT and discovered that it's very effective, and that does seem incomprehensible to people working in standard mainstream science, and so they're temperamentally inclined. Their first response is to say, "Oh, this can't be," unless you have someone like Professor Stewart who actually looks into it. I mean, it's a very understandable thing. There are lots of very strange claims around. Medicine has delivered, fantastic goods. It's been an amazing thing. So I'm absolutely not knocking mainstream medicine. Absolutely not. But it has a particular temperamental, way of handling things that are non-mainstream and regarding them as likely to be flawed, likely to be false, and that may even be true by and large.
I suppose, though, in some regards, they've got to be, because obviously, if you're dealing with people's health, then it's got to be vigorously tested. Do you think that it will, at some point in our future, become more accepted among sort of more experts, or do you think it's something that people might not take account of? Where do you see the future of EFT then?
Well, I think because I found it to be effective, and because there are some people in mainstream medicine, like I think Professor Stewart, I hope I'm getting the name right. I anticipate that it will gradually kind of osmose into the mainstream in some way, and certain physical mechanisms will be found as to why it's effective. I believe that there are ideas about how the tapping certain meridian points affect the amygdala, which is related to how fear and threat is evaluated, I believe. So already there are kind of links being formed between what one does when practicing EFT and bits of the brain that are deemed relevant to things like fear and anger and so on. So my guess is that there will be some kind of crossover from EFT into the mainstream. I mean, if it, because it's the same. Ultimately, it's the same universe we're describing. It's the same body we're talking about.
It's just obviously different ways of looking at it, and I think obviously to me, I feel that there's a whole world to be acknowledged, I suppose, by the mainstream when you're looking into different energies, as you said, chi energy, the electromagnetic spectrum of the energy field around the body then, and actually how that interacts with us. Because I suppose, do you find that a lot of like physical ailments can be helped with releasing sort of stress through EFT, or do you feel that it's more for sort of emotional therapy then?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's another technique I practice, which is really about relaxing muscles, and I'll talk about it briefly if I may. And this comes from this Hawaiian Huna system, and the idea behind that is that it involves breathing, tapping, focusing your intention and attention, doing various things. And the idea behind that is that supposing you break a wrist, you've broken your wrist, you put it in plaster, you put it in a sling, you hold it close to your body, and you may well hold it in a rather defensive way because you're protecting it, and that, holding it in that protective way itself involves muscles. You hold it in a certain way, but using muscles, and gradually the break will quickly, if you're lucky, the break heals, and the break is totally okay again. But while it's been in the sling and in the plaster and so on, you've got into this unconscious habit of holding it in a certain way, and that unconscious habit can persist, can linger, and that unconscious habit of holding these muscles in a certain way can interfere with blood flow and fluid flow and electromagnetic energy flow and nervous flow and so on, and that can give rise to a whole range of ailments, and you think, oh, that break never really healed because you've got this constellation, all these few issues that are there because of this tension. Do you see what I mean? So it's not actually. Yeah. So it's not that the break hasn't really healed. It's that something else. You set up some other thing, some other tension, and that can give rise, as I say, to a variety of things, of issues, of ailments. And if you can do this process, which simply relaxes this unconsciously held tension, then a whole set of healing, if you like, can take place, because suddenly all these fluids and communications and so on, they can flood that area and do apparently miraculous or very impressive, surprising improvements. So I don't know how relevant that is to your question, which I must admit I've forgotten, but I thought it was relevant at the time.
Yeah, I'm looking at people who maybe suffer things like I don't know, what was it, multiple sclerosis, for example, or fibromyalgia, very painful conditions. Then,
right.
And that deteriorate can, and obviously these conditions can cause a lot of stress, anguish, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Have you ever done treatment on people suffering with these sort of diseases, and has it ever yielded any positive results because of obviously the stress that's been released?
Well, I've certainly had people coming to me with anxiety and stress and so on, and been able to help them. I did have a client with MS. But if I'm honest, I don't think I didn't have a great deal of impact with her. I'm sorry to say. There seemed to be some improvement during some sessions, and then kind of relapses and so on. There wasn't a uniform improvement. I know that there's a practitioner who's done some work with fibromyalgia. That's also known as, what's the common name for that?
Fibromyalgia, I don't know about any other names.
Oh really? Oh, okay. Is that what
I know it's normally comes with chronic fatigue.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Ah, right.
Yes, sorry. Yes, and someone has done a lot of work using EFT with chronic fatigue, and apparently got very good results. In fact, she started out. The reason she came into EFT was that she got chronic fatigue and healed herself with EFT. I don't ever had someone with chronic fatigue approach me. Usually I work with people with kind of these stuck emotions like anger, fear, stress, allergies, unhelpful beliefs, limiting belief systems and so on. Because beliefs and emotions, they can all be stuck by this impeded energy flow in a similar way.
So, what? Just tapping slightly back into something that Sam was on about with.
Yes.
She mentioned about her tablets, right?
Yes.
And just sort of to correct it a bit, I know Sam obviously wouldn't dare tamper with her medication unless a doctor told her to.
Or even then, I wouldn't.
Even then she would probably be reluctant to because it's working.
Yeah.
But what sort of advice do you give patients or clients then with regards to sort of pre-existing medical conditions? Obviously, because people could be doing very similar things as what Sam in jest suggested, but they could be looking, it's going to help me, I don't know, with such and such, and then Do you get me? So
Yeah,
how
well,
do you view it? In what advice do you give people that may be looking for the EFT, but actually, with regard to pre-existing sort of medical conditions?
Well, I always ask people in our first interview what medication they're on, if any, and I'm certainly I would never tell people to come off medication. Certainly, certainly not without consulting their practitioner. When you say pre-existing medical conditions, I mean they come to me for a particular thing. So other stuff that may be going on in their life, may or may not be relevant to that particular thing. I see what I do as, it can be very specific to particular issues.
If people actually want to do EFT themselves, what is the best road for them to go down? I mean, first of all, for them to look into it as in a sort of technique to help themselves.
Yes.
And then possibly as a way, as if anyone out there is interested in maybe becoming a therapist or learning more about it in a more sort of professional means then.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it was devised by this chap called Gary Craig in the 1990s. And since then there's been a lot of development, a lot of different people have added on their own tweaks and bells and whistles and so on. And that's made Gary Craig a bit... he wants to bring it back to the original system, if you like. So he's quite keen on people learning his system. And so there's a lot of literature, a lot of free downloadable stuff, loads of case histories, loads of videos and so on Gary Craig's own EFT site. And that used to be called emofree.com. I think it has a different name now, so I'll make sure you get that and you can put it on the Facebook page. So that's a very, very good starting point. Gary Craig's own EFT site, and that includes downloadable manuals, so you can start to get stuck in totally on your own if you want to. But I know some people find it helpful to have a kind of guide if they want a session of EFT. You can do it oneself, but it's quite useful to have a guide. So that's where someone like I could come in. And so I'm a practitioner in Cardiff, and I have a Facebook page, and again I'll let Jared know the details of that.
We'll announce the websites on the show as well when we come back to the studio. I'll do it in the next break. And for anyone actually listening to this on YouTube, we're going to add the website links in the description below as well. So if anyone interested, just scroll down the page and check out the description. All the relevant links that Mark is going to send me will be on there as well. So just check out in the description below. So
as well as the stuff on the Gary Craig site, the manuals and the case histories and the downloadable manuals and so on, there's also a very good site, the Association for Meridian Therapies in the UK, and again I'll give you the details of that. If you want to go and do 3-day courses in learning EFT, and there's practitioner and master practitioner and so on, and it's very helpful to learn from someone who's got a lot of experience, and there are a lot of experienced trainers who've been doing, being practitioners for years, doing training for years. So I would really strongly recommend that if you're going to try and do EFT with other people anyway, that you get some training from a recognised group like this AMT, the Association for Meridian Therapies.
So they do courses around here, like South Wales?
They did one a couple of years ago in Talgarth that I went along to a master practitioner, just to keep my hand in.
Do you have to get like a qualification for it, or is there a recognised sort of qualification for it? Given by, is it Gary Craig? Sorry,
Gary Craig. Yes. Gary Craig.
Does he give like a recognised qualification for it, or is it more a case of, like with Reiki, it's more a case of different levels, like attunements or different levels then?
No, my understanding is Gary Craig will assess you on the work you've done and will validate it and give you certification at different levels. And so will the Association for Meridian Therapists. If you do a training with them, they will certificate you. Yeah, so it does have this kind of certification structure to it. Yes.
Excellent. I might be interested to see if we can get involved at one point, wouldn't it? It'd be nice to. What sort of levels are there? Can I ask? Are there different Is there like a level for doing it yourself where you could do a course, or are they courses more geared towards becoming like a practitioner then?
That's a good question, and I've not followed it up that closely. I mean, there are certainly practitioner training, which I did, and there's master practitioner training, which goes into it in more detail. And then there's trainers training, which I haven't done. I don't do training myself.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a level for applying it to oneself, but I'm not really sure. I'm sorry to say. I have to confess my ignorance to that one.
What we do, we'll take a look, and when it comes, when we get before broadcast, I'll announce our different levels and stuff on the show.
Yes, I can look into that.
If you want to send it through, I can take a look. And,
yes, certainly.
We'll do that.
Yes.
So what does the future hold for yourself then?
I'm practicing an EFT. I practice in this Hawaiian shamanic system called Huna.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in heart math. I don't know if you've come across heart math. It's another whole area to do with connecting the heart and the head, if you like. And the various, people are always being told to love more, haven't they? But without that, it's an easy suggestion to make, but a hard thing to actually do. The heart math, there's an institute of heart math, and what they've done is they've looked at what various breathing techniques and various techniques, a bit not totally dissimilar from NLP, but techniques for synchronizing the breath and the heart and brain waves and so on. The activity of the brain. In such a way as to really increase that kind of coherence between that union between mind and heart. And they've got some very, very interesting techniques. There's a very simple breathing technique of breathing at 6 complete in-breaths and out-breaths per minute. And doing that sets up a kind of resonant effect to do with the heart and the brain and the circulation system and so on. And there's a whole field of the variability of the heart rate variability, which is like the fine variation of the heart rate from moment to moment. And I'm going into too much detail probably, but anyway, sorry.
I'd be.
It is fascinating. As well, I personally never heard of it before. I don't know about yourself.
No. Okay.
It's an American institute, and I must say they seem to be very keen. It's a charity, but they charge a lot for all the bits of software and hardware, I have to say. But embedded in the middle of all that is proper research and just very interesting stuff. So I do it's called a heart breath. I do that typically twice a day, and it brings about a greater sense of connection with things and people around you. It's astonishing. It's a very simple discipline.
I suppose a lot of martial arts use that as well, because with Kung Fu they use different breathing techniques.
I guess that's true, yeah.
I think, is it Tai Chi as well? Does very similar sort of thing with breathing techniques. And so using like the centre point then, which would be that area, and about aligning sort of your energy lines with that centre point.
I think that's true. I think I've done a bit of Qigong, and that's allied to Tai Chi and martial arts and so on, and certainly breathing in when you're doing certain movements and out when you're doing certain other movements and so on. But heart math is the only place I've come across this notion of this resonance effect to do with breathing and heart rate and brainwaves all kind of uniting in a supportive, coherent, stress-free kind of way.
I'll look into that. Have you got any questions, Sam?
No.
No? Have we covered everything?
Definitely. From what I wanted to know, yeah.
Would you like to still go into, because I know obviously you're doing your Reiki this year, but is this something you would still actually like to go into yourself, or?
Oh yeah. It is, well, I personally find it really interesting about all the different methods you can use. But especially with people who haven't got like a lot of time on their hands, I think people would benefit from EFT.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll definitely be looking into that.
Good.
I think it's sort of to be said as well, isn't it, about stopping and monitoring yourself and monitoring your surroundings. So just stopping and taking stock. And I think we especially when you live in, a year ago I moved from the city, but in the city life you can be so bloody busy sometimes you kind of can forget who you are, can't you?
You can get caught up with being busy, yeah, certainly. So you're in Cardiff?
I used to live in Cardiff.
Oh, right.
I moved back to the Rhondda a year ago this week really, because
there's a thing, yeah.
we've lived here a year now.
Have we?
Yeah, we've actually lived here a year now.
Wow.
It is. So this is the land I grew up in.
Oh, land of your fathers. Indeed.
Land of my fathers. It is actually the land of my fathers as well. Being the son of a miner. Well, is there anything else you'd like to cover?
No, I'd like to say that I have found EFT to be a very, very kind of rapid and effective healing modality, as they say, for various things, and I commend it. Look into it, try it out. There are lots of YouTube videos apparently. I mean, I don't tend to look at them very much. There might be some slightly maverick seeming ones. So I reckon the thing I would like to say is look at the Gary Craig stuff. Go back to the source. Because he's got loads of experience and he's stayed on track. He hasn't been blown aside to do some eccentric set of manoeuvres of his own. I've enjoyed it a lot. Stayed true to the spirit of it.
Before we do go, do you have a website?
Look at Gary Craig stuff. Look at the association.
Want to find out more about you?
I've got a Facebook page about EFT called EFT Cardiff Farewell to Fear, and I've also got a website, a Facebook page called Huna in Cardiff. That's HUNA, which is this Hawaiian shamanic system. So that's EFT Cardiff Farewell to Fear and Huna in Cardiff.